The air in the Crimson Cantina was thick with smoke and the smell of cheap alcohol. Jake Harrison sat in the darkest corner of the bar, his fingers wrapped around a glass of synthetic whiskey. He had been on Kepler Station for 6 months now, and every day felt like walking on a knife's edge. Jake looked like any other trader or smuggler who frequented the cantina. His brown hair was messy, his clothes were worn, and he had the tired look of someone who had seen too much of the galaxies. Dark side. But Jake was not what he seemed. He was a human operative working for the Terran Intelligence Division, and he was very good at staying alive. The cantina was filled with aliens from every corner of known space. Tall, blue-skinned Zephyrians sat next to short, stocky Corthics. Insect-like Vraxians clicked their mandibles while they drank. Everyone here was dangerous in their own way. Pirates, mercenaries, bounty hunters, and worse gathered here to make deals and share stories. Jake had been listening to conversations for hours. His mission was simple but deadly dangerous. The Zephyrian Syndicate was selling weapons to rebel. Groups across 3 star systems. These weapons were killing innocent people, and Jake's job was to find out who's buying them and how to stop the flow. He had already learned more than his handlers back on Earth expected. The weapons came through Kepler Station every 2 weeks. They were hidden in medical supply shipments and marked as emergency relief for mining colonies. It was clever, and it had been working for years. A loud crash made Jake look up from his drink. A massive Corthic warrior had just slammed his fist on the bar. The alien stood over 7 feet tall, with gray skin covered in ritual scars. His name was Vex High, and Jake had been watching him for weeks. Vex High was one of the best killers in the galaxy, and he never took a job he could not finish. Another drink. Vex High growled at the bartender, a nervous Tyrellian who moved quickly to serve the dangerous customer. I have reason to celebrate tonight. The cantina grew quieter. When Vex High celebrated, it usually meant someone was about to die. Other patrons leaned in to listen, always eager for gossip that might keep them alive or make them money. Got myself a new contract, Vex High announced, his voice carrying across the room. Big money this time. Enough to buy my own ship and get off this rotting station. A scarred Vraxian bounty hunter named Gorthan clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among his kind. Must be a dangerous target to pay that much. What species? Zephyrian? Hegemony noble? Vex High grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. Human. The cantina fell completely silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the background music seemed to fade away. Jake felt his blood turn cold, but he kept his face calm and took another sip of his drink. Gorthan's mandibles stopped clicking. The old bounty hunter had been in the killing business for 30 years, and he had seen things that would give nightmares to most creatures. But now he looked genuinely worried. Human? Gorthan said slowly. You sure about that? Of course I am sure, Vex High snapped. Some intelligence operative who has been causing trouble for my employers. They want him dead, and they are paying very well for it. An old Tyrellian pirate at a nearby table shook his head. Bad idea, young one. Very bad idea. Vex High turned to glare at the pirate. You question my abilities? Not your abilities, the pirate said quietly. But humans are not like other species. They do not fight like others. They do not think like others. And they do not die like others. Stories, Vex High said with a dismissive wave. Legends to scare children. Humans are soft. They live easy lives on their protected worlds. One human alone is nothing. Gorthan leaned forward, his ancient eyes fixed on the young Corthic. Listen to me. Boy, I have been hunting for 3 decades. I have killed hegemony soldiers, syndicate enforcers, even rogue AI constructs. But I have never, ever taken a contract on a human operative. You know why. Vex High said nothing, but his confidence seemed to waver slightly. Because human operatives are never really alone, Gorthon continued. You think you are hunting one human, but you are not. You are declaring war on their entire species. And humans do not forget. They do not forgive. And they never stop coming. Jake had to admire the old Vraxian's wisdom. Gorthon understood something that many aliens did not. Humans might seem weak individually, but they were part of something larger. Every human operative had backup, had support, had a network that stretched across the galaxy. Superstition, Vexai said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. I have studied humans. They are emotional, unpredictable, but they are not gods. They bleed, they die. This one will be no different. Jake's communicator buzzed softly against his wrist. He glanced down at the message, keeping his face neutral. It was from Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park, his handler back on Earth. The message was short and coded, but Jake understood it perfectly. Cover may be blown. Extract to coordinates following. Do not delay. Jake deleted the message and finished his drink. 6 months of careful work, and now someone had figured out who he really was. It could have been bad luck, a security leak, or just careful observation. By the wrong people. It did not matter now. What mattered was staying alive long enough to get off the station. He stood up slowly, dropping a few credits on the table. As he walked toward the exit, he could still hear the conversation behind him. Mark my words, Gorthon was saying. No good will come of this. Humans have a saying, touch one of us, and you touch all of us. This human you are hunting, he has friends, and when they learn what happened to him, they will come for you. Let them come, Vexai replied, but Jake could hear the uncertainty in his voice now. Jake stepped out into the station's main corridor. Kepler Station was a massive structure built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. Thousands of beings lived and worked here, making it the perfect place for someone to disappear. But it was also the perfect place for someone to be hunted. He started walking toward the transport, tubes that would take him to his quarters. He needed to gather his gear and make contact with the extraction team. But as he walked, Jake's trained senses picked up something wrong. There was a presence behind him, following at a careful distance. Jake had been an operative for 8 years. He had survived missions on hostile worlds, infiltrated criminal organizations, and faced down killers who would terrify most people. He was still alive because he never ignored his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming at him. Someone was hunting him. The game had begun. Jake smiled grimly as he walked. Vexai was about to learn why even the most dangerous aliens in the galaxy knew better than to hunt human operatives. The Korthic warrior thought he was the predator, but he was about to discover that humans had their own ways of turning the hunter into the prey. The corridor ahead branched into 3 directions. Jake chose the middle path, leading toward the industrial section of the station. If Vexai wanted to hunt him, Jake would. Make sure it was on ground of his choosing. Behind him, unseen in the shadows, Vexai followed. The hunt had begun. Asterisk. Jake moved through the station's corridors like a man without a care in the world, but his mind was working fast. He had confirmed what he suspected back in the cantina. The same biosignature had appeared on his scanner 3 times in the past. Our always staying about 50 meters behind him. Vexai was good, Jake had to admit. The Korthic knew how to use crowds for cover and how to vary his distance to avoid detection. But Jake had been trained by the best instructors on Earth, and he had survived 8 years in the field by being better than good. Jake turned into a maintenance tunnel that led to the station's industrial sector. The walls here were bare metal, covered with pipes and conduits that carried power and water throughout the station. The air was warmer here, filled with the constant hum of machinery. Most importantly, it was nearly empty of civilians. Jake had been in this section before, during his months of reconnaissance. He knew every corridor, every junction, every service hatch. If Vex High wanted to hunt him, Jake would make sure the alien understood what it meant to hunt a human. The tunnel opened into a large maintenance chamber filled with massive air recycling units. Jake moved quickly now, pulling tools from his pack and setting to work. He had learned long ago that the key to surviving as a human operative was not to be stronger or faster than the enemy. It was to be smarter. Jake worked for 10 minutes, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. When he was done, the chamber looked exactly the same as before. But now it was a trap waiting to spring. Jake moved to the far side of the chamber and waited. He did not have to wait long. Vex High entered the chamber slowly, his weapon drawn. The Korthic's gray skin was covered with a sheen of sweat, and his breathing was heavy. He had been tracking Jake for over an hour, and the hunt was taking its toll. "I know you are here, human," Vex High called out. "Show yourself and I will make your death quick." Jake stepped out from behind a recycling unit, his hands raised as if in surrender. "You found me." Vex High smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "You are smaller than I expected. The stories made you sound more dangerous. Stories have a way of growing in the telling," Jake said calmly. "But sometimes they are not big enough." Vex High raised his weapon, a plasma rifle that could cut through steel. "Any last words, human?" "Just 3, Jake said. "Welcome to Earth." Jake dove to the side as Vex High pulled the trigger. The plasma bolt struck the wall behind where Jake had been standing, but instead of simply burning through the metal, it triggered something else. The bolt hit a carefully placed charge that Jake had rigged to one of the main power conduits. The explosion was not large, but it was perfectly placed. The power conduit ruptured, sending a cascade of electrical energy through the chamber's metal walls. Vex High, who had been standing on the metal floor while holding a conductive weapon, received the full force of the electrical discharge. The Korthic screamed as thousands of volts coursed through his body. He fell to the ground, his weapon clattering. Away across the floor, smoke rose from his burned flesh, and his breathing was ragged. Jake walked over to where Vex High lay twitching on the floor. The alien was still alive, but barely. Jake had used nothing but standard maintenance tools and his knowledge of the station systems. No fancy weapons, no advanced technology. Just human ingenuity and the ability to turn any environment into a weapon. "The stories were not big enough," Jake said quietly. "We are much worse than you thought." Vex High struggled to speak, his vocal cords damaged by the electrical shock. "How?" he managed to whisper. "Because you made the same mistake everyone makes," Jake said. "You thought you were hunting a human. You were wrong. You were hunting in a human environment. This entire station was built by humans. Every system, every circuit, every safety protocol was designed by human minds. You are not hunting me in your territory. You are hunting me in mine." Jake turned to leave, but Vex High grabbed his ankle with a burned hand. The Korthic's eyes were filled with pain and confusion. "This is not over," Vex High gasped. "I will call for help. My pack will come. You cannot fight all of us." Jake looked down at the wounded alien. "You still do not understand. This was not a fight. This was a lesson. But if you want to make it a war, we can do that too. Just remember that you started it." Jake walked away, leaving Vex High alive but broken on the chamber floor. He had made his point. The Korthic would survive, but he would never forget what had happened here. Jake moved deeper into the industrial section, using service tunnels and maintenance shafts to avoid the main corridors. His communicator buzzed again, and he saw coded message from Captain Ryan Cole, his backup operative. Chatter indicates multiple hostiles converging on your position. Suggest immediate extraction. Jake sent back a short reply. Negative. Too close to primary objective. Maintaining position. He was not going to run. Not when he was so close to completing his mission. The Zephyrian Syndicate was moving a major. Weapons shipment in 2 days, and Jake had finally identified the buyer. If he could gather that intelligence, it would save thousands of lives across 3 star systems. Jake found a secure position in an unused storage area and settled into. Wait, he knew Vexhai would not give up easily. The Korthic's pride had been wounded along with his body, and Jake had learned that wounded pride could be more dangerous than any weapon. His scanner showed new contacts moving through the station. Vexhai had indeed called for help. Jake counted. At least 6 new biosignatures heading toward the industrial sector. The hunter had become the hunted, but now the odds were getting worse. Jake checked his equipment. He had a sidearm with 2 full clips, a small supply of explosives, and various tools and gadgets. Against 6 or more trained killers, it was not much, but Jake had something his enemies did not understand. He had the home field advantage. Kepler Station had been built by humans 50 years ago, during the early days of galactic expansion. Every human operative learned the basic principles of human engineering and design. Jake knew how the station's systems worked, how they could be manipulated, and how they could be turned into weapons. His communicator buzzed again. This time it was from Megan Foster, a tech specialist who worked undercover in the station's computer center. Multiple security. Alerts in your sector. Station admin is asking questions. Can provide system access if needed. Jake smiled. Megan was one of 3 human operatives on the station that he knew about. There might be others, working so deep undercover that even he did not know their identities. That was how the human intelligence network worked. Every operative was part of a larger web, and that web was always watching. Jake sent back a message. Stand by. May need station environmental controls. He could hear voices now, coming from the main corridor outside his hiding place. Vexhai was back on his feet, and he had brought friends. Jake could make out at least 4 different voices, all speaking. In the harsh Korthic language, Jake moved to a ventilation grate and looked out into the corridor. Vexhai was there, his gray skin covered with burn marks from the electrical discharge. He was leaning on a younger Korthic for support, but his eyes were bright with rage and determination. The human is here somewhere, Vexhai was saying. Search. Every room, every hiding place. I want him found. Jake watched as the Korthics spread out through the industrial sector. They were good hunters, he had to admit. They moved with discipline and covered each other's positions. But they were making one critical mistake. They were thinking like hunters stalking prey in the wilderness. Jake was not prey. He was a human operative, and he was about to show them the difference. Jake opened his communicator and sent a message. To Megan, need environmental controls now. Prepare for full station alert. The hunt was about to become a war, and Jake intended to win it. The lights in the industrial sector began to flicker and went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, bathing the corridors in a dim red glow. Jake smiled in the darkness. Megan had come through for him. The Korthic. Voices became louder and more confused. They had not expected the human to have control over the station systems. Jake moved silently through the maintenance tunnels, using his knowledge of the station's layout to stay ahead of his hunters. His communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from Megan. Environmental systems under your control. Station admin is panicking. Security teams being deployed to your sector. Jake typed back quickly. Keep them busy. Need 20 minutes. 20 minutes to end this hunt once and for all. Jake had decided that simply evading Vexhai and his pack was not enough. The story of what happened here would spread throughout the galaxy's criminal underworld. Jake needed to make sure it was the right story. Jake reached a junction where 3 corridors met. This was where he would make his stand. He began working quickly, using the tools in his pack and his knowledge of human engineering to prepare his battlefield. The station's artificial gravity was controlled by generators placed throughout the structure. Jake accessed the control panel for this section and began making adjustments. He did not turn off the gravity completely, but he reduced it to about 1/3 of normal. For someone who had grown up on Earth, with its heavy gravity, this would feel almost weightless. For aliens who were used to the station's standard gravity, it would be disorienting and dangerous. Next, Jake accessed the atmospheric controls. He began pumping additional oxygen into the corridor system. Too much oxygen could be dangerous, but Jake was not trying to kill anyone with it. He was creating the conditions for something much more spectacular. Jake heard footsteps approaching from the main corridor. The Cortex were getting closer, following his trail through the industrial sector. Jake moved to his final position and waited. Vex High was the first to enter the junction, his plasma rifle raised and ready. The reduced gravity caught him off guard immediately. His first step sent him floating higher than expected, and he had to grab a pipe to keep from bouncing off the ceiling. "What is this?" Vex High snarled in confusion. "Welcome to my world," Jake said from the shadows. Vex High spun toward the voice, but Jake was already moving. In the reduced gravity, Jake moved like a dancer, using the walls and ceiling to change direction in ways that seemed impossible. Cortex tried to track him with their weapons, but they were clumsy and awkward in the altered environment. Jake had one more surprise for them. He pulled a small device from his pack and pressed a button. The device was a simple flare, the kind used by maintenance workers to signal emergencies. But in the oxygen-rich atmosphere Jake had created, the flare burned much brighter and hotter than normal. The brilliant light filled the junction, temporarily blinding the Cortex. In that moment of confusion, Jake struck. He used the reduced gravity to leap from wall to wall, moving faster than his enemies could follow. He was not trying to kill them, just disable them and make his point. Jake landed behind the first Cortex and struck him in the back of the neck with a precise blow. That would paralyze him temporarily. The alien fell to the ground, unable to move but still conscious. Jake was already moving toward the next target before the first one hit the floor. The second Cortex tried to turn and fire, but the reduced gravity threw off his aim. The plasma bolt went wide, striking the wall and leaving a glowing hole in the metal. Jake used the alien's own momentum against him, grabbing his arm and using the low gravity to throw him into the ceiling with bone-crushing force. Vex High and the remaining 2 Cortex clustered together, trying to cover each other's backs. They were experienced fighters, and they were learning to adapt to the strange conditions. But Jake had one more advantage they did not know about. Jake's communicator buzzed with a message from Tony Rivera, the demolitions expert who worked in the Eye Station's mining section. Charges set in lower levels. "Ready when you are." Jake smiled grimly. Tony had been busy while Jake was playing with the Cortex. Now it was time to end this. Jake threw a small object into the center of the junction. It looked like another flare, but it was actually a flashbang grenade he had improvised from mining explosives. The device went off with a tremendous bang and a blinding flash of light. In the confusion that followed, Jake moved like a ghost through the smoke and chaos. The Cortex were deaf and blind, stumbling around in the reduced gravity while Jake systematically took them down. He used their own weapons against them, turning their strength into weakness with precise strikes and clever tactics. Smoke cleared. Jake was the only one still standing. The 4 Cortex lay on the floor, alive but defeated. Vex High was propped against a wall, his proud warrior spirit finally broken. How? Vex High whispered. How did one human defeat my entire pack? Jake knelt down next to the wounded alien. Because you still do not understand what you are fighting. You think you are hunting one human, but you are not. You are fighting the entire human race. Jake stood up and activated his communicator. Megan, restore normal lighting and gravity to this section. Send a medical team to Junction 7 in the industrial sector. We have wounded aliens who need attention. As the lights came back on and gravity returned to normal, Jake could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. Security teams were finally arriving, but the fight was over. Jake had made his point in the most dramatic way possible. Captain Ryan Cole was the first to reach the junction. He took in the scene with the practiced eye of a veteran operative. 4 defeated Korthiks, scorch marks on the walls, and Jake standing calmly in the middle of it all. Looks like you had some excitement, Ryan said dryly. Nothing I could not handle, Jake replied. But we have a bigger problem now. This was not just a random bounty hunt. Someone hired these Korthiks specifically to take me out. Someone knows who I am and what I am doing here. Ryan nodded grimly. The syndicate has to be, which means our cover is blown and our mission is compromised. But it also means we are close to something they do not want us to find. Jake looked down at Vex High, who was being treated by the medical team that had just arrived. The Korthik warrior was watching Jake with a mixture of fear and respect that had not been there before. Listen to me, Jake said to Vex High. You are going to live through this. When you do, I want you to spread the word. Tell everyone in every cantina, on every station, in every criminal hideout you visit. Tell them what happened here today. Tell them why no one hunts human operatives. Vex High nodded weakly. He understood now. The human had not just defeated him physically. He had defeated the very idea that humans were weak and helpless. From now on, when criminals heard that a human operative was involved in something, they would remember this story. Jake walked away from the scene, leaving the security teams to clean up the mess. His mission was not over yet. A syndicate had revealed their hand by trying to kill him. Now Jake knew he was on the right track, and he was more determined than ever to complete his mission. But first, he needed to contact his handlers on Earth. This incident would have consequences far beyond Kepler Station. Word would spread through the criminal networks that humans were not to be trifled with. That reputation was one of the most valuable assets human operatives had, and Jake had just made it stronger. Jake smiled as he walked through the station's corridors. Vex High had wanted to hunt a human operative. Instead, he had learned why even the most dangerous aliens in the galaxy knew better than to try. The message went out through channels that did not officially exist. Hidden transmitters tucked away in cargo containers, encrypted signals bouncing off relay stations, coded phrases buried in routine commercial communications. To anyone listening, it would sound like normal space traffic. But to those who knew how to listen, the message was clear and urgent. Human operative under threat. Network response authorized. Colonel Sam Wright was negotiating mining rights on Epsilon Prime when the message reached him. He was supposed to be a retired Earth military officer looking for a quiet investment opportunity. In reality, he was mapping the defensive positions of the separatist movement that controlled the Rim. Worlds. The mission was important, but not as important as the message he had just received. Sam excused himself from the meeting and walked to his ship. Within an hour, he was in hyperspace, heading for Kepler Station. His cover identity could be rebuilt. Later. Right now, a fellow human operative needed help, and that took priority over everything else. Agent Kelly Brooks was in the middle of delicate negotiations with the Hegemony Council when her communicator delivered the coded message. She was so close to securing a trade agreement that would give Earth access to 3 new shipping routes. It was the kind of diplomatic victory that could advance her career and benefit her entire planet. Kelly stood up in the middle of the council session and announced that she had to leave immediately due to a family emergency. The hegemony officials were confused and offended, but Kelly did not care. She was already thinking about the fastest route to Kepler Station. The negotiations could wait. Family came first, and every human operative was family. Commander Nick Stone received the message while he was infiltrating a pirate base in the Outer Rim. He had spent 3 months earning the trust of the pirate captain, and he was only days away from learning the location of their main supply depot. Taking out that depot would save dozens of merchant ships and hundreds of lives. Nick looked at the message again, then began planning his extraction. The pirate depot was important, but not as important as the unwritten rule that bound all human operatives together. When one of them was in trouble, the others came running. No questions asked, no mission too important to abandon. On Kepler Station, Jake was unaware of the forces gathering to help him. He was focused on his original mission, trying to complete his intelligence gathering before the Syndicate realized how much damage had been done to their operation. Jake made his way to the commercial district, where he had a meeting with one of his informants. Chun Wei was a civilian trader who had stumbled onto the Syndicate's weapon smuggling operation by accident. She had been too scared to go to the authorities, but Jake had convinced her to help by promising her protection. Jake found Chun in her small shop, surrounded by crates of various goods from across the galaxy. She looked nervous, constantly glancing at the door as if expecting trouble to walk in at any moment. "You should not be here," Chin said as soon as she saw Jake. "Word is spreading that you are not who you claim to be. The Syndicate knows you are an agent." "I know," Jake said calmly. "That is why I need the information now. Tell me about the weapons shipment." Chun hesitated, then pulled out a small data pad. "The shipment arrives tomorrow night. Docking Bay 47. But Jake, they are not just bringing weapons this time. They are bringing something else. Something that scared my contact enough to quit and leave the system." Jake took the data pad and scanned the information. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Syndicate was not just smuggling conventional weapons anymore. They were bringing in biological weapons designed to target specific genetic markers. The kind of weapons that could wipe out entire species. "Chun, you need to get off this station," Jake said urgently. "Take your ship and go anywhere else. Do not come back until you hear that the Syndicate is finished." Chun nodded and began packing her most valuable items. "What about you? If they know who you are, why are you staying?" "Because if I do not stop this shipment, millions of people are going to die," Jake said. "And because I am not as alone as they think I am." Jake left Chun's shop and made his way to a secure communication point. He needed to contact his handlers and report what he had learned. But as he walked through the station's corridors, he noticed something strange. There were more humans around than usual. A maintenance worker he had never seen before nodded to him as he passed. A trader in the commercial district gave him a subtle hand signal used by Earth Intelligence Services. A security guard at a checkpoint stepped aside to let him pass without the usual identification check. Jake realized what was happening. The network was activating. Human operatives and assets throughout the station were revealing themselves, preparing for something big. Jake had thought he was working alone, but he was starting to understand that he had never been alone at all. Jake reached the main communication point and sent his report to Earth. The response came back within minutes, and it was not what he expected. Mission parameters changed. Primary objective now preventing biological weapon deployment. All necessary resources authorized. Network support confirmed. Jake smiled grimly. Earth had just given him permission to do whatever it took to stop the Syndicate. And judging by the activity he was seeing around the station, he was going to have help. Danny Russell, the station security chief, appeared at Jake's shoulder as if from nowhere. Danny was supposed to be a retired Earth military officer who had taken a quiet job keeping the peace on a trading station. But the look in his eyes told Jake that there was more to Danny's story than his official record suggested. "Jake," Danny said quietly, "we need to talk privately." Danny led Jake to a secure office in the security section. Once the door was closed and the jamming devices were active, Danny's official demeanor disappeared completely. "I have been monitoring communications since the incident with the Corthix," Danny said. "The Syndicate is panicking. They know their operation is compromised, and they are moving up their timeline. The biological weapons are arriving tonight, not tomorrow." Jake felt a chill of fear. "Tonight? That does not give us much time to prepare. That is why I'm here," Danny said. "I am not really the security chief of this station. I am Colonel Daniel Russell, Earth Intelligence Division, and I have been running deep cover operations in this sector for 5 years. You are not the only human operative on Kepler Station, Jake. You are just the only one who is supposed to know you are an operative." Jake stared at Danny in shock. "How many of us are there?" "More than you think. Less than we need for what is coming. The Syndicate is not just bringing biological weapons. They are bringing a private army to clean up their operation and eliminate all witnesses. They know the human intelligence network is active, and they want to send a message." Danny activated a holographic display that showed the station's layout. Red dots appeared throughout the structure, marking hostile positions. Blue dots marked friendly assets. Jake was amazed to see how many blue dots there were. "The Syndicate thinks they are fighting one human operative who got lucky," Danny said. "They are about to learn what happens when you threaten the human intelligence network. Every operative, every asset, every friend we have made on this station is ready to fight." Jake looked at the display and felt a surge of pride and determination. He had thought he was alone, but he was part of something much larger, something that the Syndicate was about to experience firsthand. "What are our orders?" Jake asked. Danny smiled grimly. "Stop the biological weapons. Protect the civilians. Show the galaxy why no one hunts human operatives. And Jake?" "Yes? Make sure some of the Syndicate people survive to tell the story. The network's reputation is our best defense, and reputation is built on stories. Tonight, we are going to give them a story they will never forget." The Syndicate's assault ship arrived at Kepler Station 3 hours ahead of schedule. It was a massive vessel, bristling with weapons and carrying enough firepower to level a small city. The ship's captain was confident that the operation would be quick and clean. Eliminate the human operative, recover the biological weapons, and send a message to Earth that the Syndicate was not to be interfered with. The captain had no idea what he was flying into. Jake watched from the station's command center as the Syndicate ship docked at Bay 47. Danny Russell stood beside him, along with a dozen other humans who had revealed their true identities over the past few hours. Megan Foster from the computer center, Tony Rivera from mining operations, Dr. Patricia Lane from the medical bay, and others Jake had never suspected of being operatives. "Remember," Danny said quietly, "we are not just fighting for this station or even for our mission. We are fighting for the reputation that keeps every human operative safe across the galaxy. What we do here tonight will be talked about for decades." Jake nodded, checking his equipment one final time. He carried his standard sidearm and a pack full of improvised weapons and tools. But his real weapon was his knowledge of the station and the network of humans who were ready to fight alongside him. The Syndicate forces began moving through the station in 3 groups. The first group headed for the docking bays to secure their escape route. The second group moved toward the command center to take control of station operations. The third group, led by a massive alien enforcer named Korath, went hunting for Jake. What the Syndicate did not know was that every step they took was being monitored and reported by human assets throughout the station. Bartenders, maintenance, workers, shop owners, and security guards all fed information to the human operatives. The Syndicate thought they were conducting a surprise assault, but they were actually walking into a carefully prepared trap. Jake and his team struck first at the docking bay. Tony Rivera had spent hours placing explosive charges throughout the bay's support structure. When the Syndicate soldiers tried to secure their escape route, they found themselves trapped in a collapsing maze of twisted metal and debris. The explosion was carefully controlled to damage the bay without breaching the station's hull, but it was spectacular enough to be seen and heard throughout the station. Within minutes, word was spreading through the criminal networks that the humans were fighting back. The second Syndicate group fared no better. Megan Foster had turned the station's own security systems against them. Blast doors slammed shut at precisely the wrong moments, separating the alien soldiers from their support. Environmental controls flooded corridors with knockout gas or turned off the gravity at critical moments. The station itself seemed to be fighting against the invaders, but it was the third group that provided the most important lesson. Korath and his soldiers were the best the Syndicate had to offer. They were experienced killers who had terrorized entire star systems. They expected to hunt down one frightened human operative hiding somewhere in the station. Instead, they found themselves facing the full might of the human intelligence network. Jake appeared first, seeming to materialize out of the shadows in a maintenance corridor. Korath raised his weapon, but Jake was already moving. The alien fired, but Jake had vanished again, leaving only the echo of his voice behind. "You made a mistake coming here." Jake's voice came from the station's communication system. "You thought you were hunting one human. You were wrong." Korath and his soldiers found themselves in a nightmare of confusion and terror. Humans appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking from unexpected directions and vanishing before the aliens could respond. The station itself seemed to be alive and hostile, with every system turned against the invaders. Dr. Patricia Lane emerged from a medical bay, carrying what looked like a simple first aid kit. But when Korath's soldiers tried to grab her, they discovered that the medical supplies were actually carefully prepared chemical weapons that left them gasping and blind. Danny Russell appeared with a squad of security officers who moved with military precision. They were not the lazy station guards the Syndicate had expected, but trained Earth military personnel who had been waiting years for a chance to show what they could do. The battle moved through the station's corridors like a deadly dance. The Syndicate soldiers were stronger and better armed than the humans, but they were fighting on human ground by human rules. Every advantage they thought they had was turned against them. Jake finally confronted Korath face to face in the station's Central Plaza. The massive alien enforcer stood over 8 feet tall and carried enough weapons to outfit a small army. Jake looked tiny by comparison, armed with nothing but his sidearm and his wits. "You are the one who has caused all this trouble," Korath growled. "The human operative who thinks he can stand against the Syndicate." "I am Jake Harrison," Jake said calmly. "Earth Intelligence Division. And you are about to learn why no one hunts human operatives." Korath laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "One human against me? This will be over quickly." "You are right," Jake said. "It will be." Jake raised his hand and gave a simple signal. Suddenly, humans appeared from every direction. They emerged from shops and offices, from maintenance hatches and security posts. Traders and bartenders, doctors and engineers, security guards and computer technicians. All of them were armed, all of them were ready to fight, and all of them were focused on Korath. The alien enforcer looked around in growing horror. He had not been hunting one human operative. He had declared war on an entire network of humans who had been living and working on the station for years, waiting for a moment like this. "You see," Jake said, "when you hunt one of us, you hunt all of us. When you threaten one human operative, you threaten every human in the galaxy. And we do not forget. We do not forgive. And we never stop coming." The battle that followed was brief and decisive. Koroth was a skilled fighter, but no one could stand against dozens of humans working together with perfect coordination. When it was over, the alien enforcer lay defeated on the plaza floor, alive but broken. The remaining syndicate forces surrendered within minutes. Word of Koroth's defeat spread through their ranks like wildfire, and the fight went out of them completely. They had come to the station expecting to terrorize helpless civilians and hunt down one isolated operative. Instead, they had run into the full strength of the human intelligence network. Jake knelt down next to Koroth as the medical teams arrived to treat the wounded alien. "You are going to live," Jake said. "When you do, I want you to remember this. Okay, I want you to tell everyone you meet about what happened here. Tell them how you came to hunt one human operative and found yourself fighting an entire species." Koroth nodded weakly, his eyes filled with the same mixture of fear and respect that Jake had seen in Vex High. The lesson had been taught, and it had been learned. 3 days later, Jake sat in the Crimson Cantina, back in his corner table with a glass of synthetic whiskey. The cantina was quieter than usual. Word of the battle had spread throughout the galaxy's criminal networks, and many of the usual patrons had found urgent business elsewhere. Vex High entered the cantina, his body still showing the scars from his encounter with Jake. He walked slowly to the bar and ordered a drink, but his eyes kept flicking toward Jake's table. Finally, he gathered his courage and approached. "Human," Vex High said quietly. "May I sit?" Jake gestured to the chair across from him. Vex High sat down carefully, wincing from his injuries. "I have been thinking about what you said," Vex High began. "About the stories not being big enough. I understand now. The stories were not about individual humans being dangerous. They were about what happens when you threaten any human." Jake nodded. "The network protects all of us. Every human operative, every human civilian, every human ship that travels between the stars. We watch out for each other because we know that we are stronger together than we could ever be alone." A young Tyrellian mercenary at a nearby table was bragging loudly about a contract he had just accepted. "Big money for eliminating some human trader who has been interfering with hegemony business," the young alien was saying. "How hard can it be? Humans are soft." The cantina fell silent. Every alien in the room turned to look at the young Tyrellian, who suddenly realized he had said something very wrong. Vex High stood up slowly and walked over to the young mercenary's table. "Let me tell you a story," the scarred Korthix said. "A story about why no one hunts human operatives. A story about what happens when you make the mistake of thinking that humans are soft." Jake finished his drink and left the cantina, knowing that the story would be told correctly. The reputation that protected every human operative in the galaxy had been strengthened once again. The network remained strong, and the galaxy remained reminded of why hunting humans was a mistake that few made twice. Outside the cantina, Jake activated his communicator and sent a message to his handlers on Earth. Mission accomplished. Syndicate neutralized. Biological weapons secured. Network integrity maintained. Reputation enhanced. The response came back quickly. "Well done. New assignment follows." "Transport leaves in 6 hours." Jake smiled and walked away through the stations. Corridors. Somewhere in the galaxy, another human operative